The cave reeked of damp earth and blood, the kind of stench that clawed at your throat and made your heart pound like a war drum. Elena's ragged breaths echoed off the jagged walls as she pressed her back against the cold stone, her arm throbbing where a gash wept crimson. Across from her, Riley's silhouette loomed, her blue eyes glinting with a fury that could burn through steel. "You did this," Riley hissed, her voice low and venomous, each word a blade aimed at Elena's chest. "You and your reckless heroics now were trapped, bleeding and hunted." Her leather jacket was torn at the shoulder, her knuckles bruised from the fight that had driven them into this godforsaken cave in the Oregon wilderness. Elena laughed, a bitter sound that ricocheted through the darkness. "Me? You're the one who charged in like some alpha savior, Riley. Don't pin this on me when you're the reason we're stuck here." Her green eyes flashed, defiance masking the fear clawing at her insides. They were enemies, had been for years, but the heat in Riley's gaze wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something that made Elena's pulse race in ways she didn't want to admit. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not now, not ever. Elena had spent the last 5 years carving out a life in Portland, working as a freelance journalist who exposed corruption in the city's underbelly. She was good at it, maybe. Her latest investigation into a shady logging company had led her to Riley, the company's enigmatic security chief. Riley was everything Elena despised. Cold, calculating, and fiercely loyal to the people signing her checks. Their paths had crossed in heated confrontations before public forums, protest lines, even a courtroom once, but it was always professional. Until it wasn't. 3 days ago, Elena had received a tip about illegal deforestation in the Cascades. She'd trekked into the forest, camera in hand, expecting to catch the company red-handed. Instead, she'd stumbled into a trap. Armed men, hired by the company to silence nosy reporters, had chased her through the trees. She'd run, heart-pounding, until she'd collided with Riley, of all people, who was out there for reasons she wouldn't explain. A scuffle, a gunshot, and a desperate sprint later, they'd ended up in this cave, cut off from the world with those men still out there hunting. Now, Elena sat on the cave floor, her flannel shirt sticking to her skin, the gash on her arm pulsing with pain. Riley paced like a caged wolf, her boots scuffing the dirt. "We need a plan," Riley said, her voice clipped. "Sitting here waiting to die isn't an option." Elena snorted, wincing as she adjusted her arm. "Oh, now you want my input? Thought I was just the reckless one." Riley stopped, turning to face her. The lantern between them cast shadows that danced across her sharp features, softening the edges of her scowl. "You think I wanted this? To be stuck here with you?" Her voice cracked, betraying something raw beneath the anger. "You're a walking disaster, Elena. Always have been." The words stung, but Elena refused to flinch. "And you're a heartless machine who'd sell her soul for a paycheck. Yet here we are." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "So tell me, Riley, why'd you save me back there? Why not let them take me?" Riley's jaw tightened, her eyes locking onto Elena's. For a moment, the cave was silent except for the drip of water somewhere deep within. Then Riley turned away, muttering, "Don't flatter yourself. I didn't do it for you." But Elena saw a flicker in Riley's eyes, the way her hands clenched as if fighting some internal war. It was the same look Elena had caught during their last confrontation at a protest, when their argument had ended with them standing too close, breathing too hard, the air electric with something neither would name. The cave was a tomb, sealing them in with their pasts. Elena's mind drifted to the first time she'd met Riley, 2 years ago at a community meeting about the logging company's expansion. Riley had stood at the front, all confidence and control, defending her employers with a charisma that made Elena's blood boil. Elena had challenged her, calling out the company's environmental crimes in front of everyone. Riley hadn't backed down, her blue eyes locking onto Elena's with a mix of disdain and intrigue. That night, Elena had gone home fuming, but she couldn't shake the image of Riley's gaze, like a storm she wanted to dive into. Now, trapped together, that storm was closer than ever. Elena shifted, her arms screaming in protest. "We need to clean this wound," she said, breaking the silence. "Unless you want me to bleed out and haunt you forever." Riley sighed, crouching beside her. She pulled a small first aid kit from her jacket because of course Riley was prepared for everything. "Hold still," she muttered, her fingers brushing Elena's skin as she inspected the gash. The touch was clinical, but Elena's breath hitched anyway. Riley noticed her eyes flicking up, and for a split second their gazes locked. "Don't get any ideas," Riley said, her voice gruff as she began cleaning the wound. "Too late," Elena shot back, smirking despite the pain. "You're already playing nurse. Next, you'll be confessing your undying love." Riley's hand froze, and Elena regretted the words instantly. The air grew heavy, charged with the weight of things unsaid. Riley resumed her work, her movements precise but tense. "You talk too much," she said finally. "Always have." Elena watched her, the lantern light catching the curve of Riley's jaw, the faint scar above her eyebrow. She wanted to hate her god. She should hate her, but there was something about Riley that pulled at her, like a tide she couldn't fight. Hours passed, marked only by the slow drip of water and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. The men hunting them hadn't found the cave yet, but Elena knew it was only a matter of time. Riley had built a small fire, its warmth a fragile shield against the cold. They sat across from each other, the flames flickering between them like a barrier neither dared cross. "We need to talk about what happens if they find us," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Riley's eyes darkened. "They won't. I'll make sure of it." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What, you're gonna take them all on?" "You're good, Riley, but not that good." Riley leaned forward, her voice low and intense. "You don't know what I'm capable of, Elena. You never have." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Elena's heart pounded, not just from the danger outside but from the way Riley looked at her like she was a puzzle Riley couldn't solve but desperately wanted to. "Then show me," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me who you really are, Riley. Because I'm starting to think you're not just the company's attack dog." Riley's expression faltered, a crack in her armor. For the first time, Elena saw something like fear in her eyes, not of the men outside, but of whatever truth she was holding back. Before Riley could respond, a sound echoed from the cave's entrancia, twigs snapping, followed by the low murmur of voices. The hunters were close. Elena's stomach dropped and Riley's hand shot to her side, gripping a knife Elena hadn't noticed before. "Stay behind me," Riley whispered, her voice steady but urgent. Elena wanted to argue, but the look in Riley's eyes silenced her. For the first time she saw not just the alpha, not just the enemy, but a woman who'd risk everything to keep her safe. And that scared Elena more than the men outside ever could. The cave seemed to shrink as the voices outside grew louder, their words indistinct but laced with menace. Elena's pulse thundered in her ears, her wounded arm a dull ache compared to the adrenaline flooding her veins. Riley crouched near the entrance, her knife glinting in the firelight, her body coiled like a predator ready to strike. "Stay down," Riley whispered, her voice a low growl that sent a shiver through Elena. "And for once in your life, don't argue." Elena bit back a retort, her eyes fixed on Riley's silhouette. The woman was a fortress of control, but there was a tremor in her grip on the knife, a hint of something human beneath the steel. Elena wanted to trust her, but years of animosity made her hesitate. Riley had been her enemy for so long, a symbol of everything she fought against. Yet here in this damp, claustrophobic cave, Riley was her only lifeline. The voices outside stopped, replaced by the crunch of boots on gravel. Elena held her breath, her hand instinctively reaching for a rock on the cave floor. If it came to a fight, she wouldn't go down without swinging. Riley glanced back, her blue eyes locking onto Elena's, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. There was no company, no protests, no past, just a shared heartbeat in the face of danger. Then a beam of light sliced through the cave's entrance, a flashlight sweeping the darkness. Riley moved like lightning, pressing herself against the wall, her knife raised. Elena's heart lurched as a man's voice called out, "They're in here somewhere. Spread out." Riley's eyes flicked to Elena, a silent command to stay still. But Elena wasn't built for sitting idle. She crawled closer to Riley, whispering, "We can't just wait for them to find us. There's gotta be another way out." Riley's jaw clenched, her voice barely audible. "There's a tunnel deeper in. I saw it earlier. But it's a risk, could be a dead end. Better than sitting here like prey." Elena shot back, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. Riley hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me. Stay close." They moved deeper into the cave, the fire's light fading behind them. The air grew colder, the walls narrowing until Elena's shoulders brushed against damp stone. Riley led the way, her steps sure despite the darkness, her knife still in hand. Elena's arm throbbed, but she forced herself to keep up, her mind racing with questions she didn't dare ask. Why was Riley here? Why risk her life for someone she claimed to despise? The tunnel twisted, the air growing thick with the scent of moss and earth. Elena's foot slipped on a slick rock and she stumbled, her hand catching Riley's arm. Riley froze, her muscles tensing under Elena's touch. For a split second, neither moved, the contact electric in the suffocating dark. Careful, Riley muttered, her voice softer than before. She didn't pull away. Elena's throat tightened. Thanks, she managed, her fingers lingering a moment too long before she let go. They pressed on, the tunnel opening into a larger chamber. A faint trickle of water echoed, and Riley held up a hand, signaling Elena to stop. She pulled a small flashlight from her jacket, its beam revealing a pool of water at the chamber's center, fed by a stream seeping through the rock. Beyond it, the tunnel continued, narrower and darker. This is our shot, Riley said, her voice low. If we're lucky, it leads out. If not. She didn't finish the sentence. Elena nodded, her heart pounding. Then we make our own luck. Riley's lips twitched, almost a smile. You're impossible. You love it, Elena teased, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Riley's eyes widened, and Elena cursed herself inwardly. Why did she keep pushing, keep flirting with the line between them? Before Riley could respond, a shout echoed from the tunnel behind them. The hunters were closing in. Riley grabbed Elena's hand, pulling her toward the narrow passage. Move, she hissed, her grip firm but not rough. Elena's skin burned where Riley's fingers touched, and she hated how much she didn't want to let go. The passage was a nightmare of tight squeezes and sharp rocks. Elena's arms screamed with every movement, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage Riley had applied. Riley stayed ahead, her flashlight cutting through the dark, her focus unshakable. But Elena could sense the strain in her, the way her shoulders tensed every time a sound echoed from behind. They emerged into another chamber, this one smaller, with a low ceiling that forced them to crouch. Riley swept her flashlight around, revealing no exit, just a dead end. Elena's stomach sank. Great, she muttered, leaning against the wall. Trapped again. Riley's face was grim. We'll backtrack. There's gotta be another way. But the sound of boots was closer now, accompanied by the clatter of gear. The hunters were thorough, relentless. Elena's mind raced, searching for a plan, but all she could think about was Riley, who'd saved her life twice now, who looked at her with a mix of anger and something else, something that made Elena's chest ache. Riley, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. If we don't make it out, don't. Riley cut her off, her eyes blazing. We're getting out. Both of us. Elena swallowed, her throat tight. I need to say this. I've hated you for years. Hated everything you stand for. But I don't know what's happening here, and it's scaring the hell out of me. Riley's breath hitched, her flashlight trembling in her hand. You think I'm not scared, she said, her voice raw. You think I want to feel. Whatever this is. You're the enemy, Elena. You've always been the enemy. Then why are you here? Elena demanded, stepping closer despite the danger, the pain, the fear. Why are you protecting me? Riley's jaw worked, her eyes searching Elena's face. Because I can't not, she admitted, the words tearing out of her like a confession. Because every time I look at you, a loud crack interrupted her, the sound of rock shifting somewhere in the tunnel. Riley spun, her knife raised, her body shielding Elena's. The hunters were close, too close. Elena's heart pounded, but it wasn't just fear driving it now. It was Riley's words, the crack in her voice, the truth she hadn't finished saying. We need to move, Riley said, her voice steady again, but her eyes betrayed her. She was as shaken as Elena, maybe more. Elena nodded, her hand brushing Riley's arm as they turned back to the tunnel. Together, she said, the word a promise she didn't fully understand. Riley met her gaze, and for a moment, the world outside the cave didn't exist. Then she nodded, and they plunged back into the dark, hand in hand, running from the hunters but toward something neither could name. The tunnel seemed to pulse with their fear. the walls closing in as Elena and Riley ran, their breaths ragged in the stifling dark. The hunters' shouts echoed behind them, a relentless drumbeat that drove their feet faster. Elena's arm burned, her vision blurring from pain and exhaustion, but Riley's hand in hers was an anchor, pulling her forward through the terror. "Keep going," Riley urged, her voice strained but firm. Her flashlight beam danced wildly, illuminating jagged rocks and slick patches of moss. Elena stumbled, her knees grazing the stone, but Riley yanked her up without breaking stride. The contact sent a jolt through Elena, a reminder of the confession Riley had left unfinished, a confession that could change everything. They reached a fork in the tunnel, two paths branching into darkness. Riley skidded to a stop, her chest heaving as she swept the flashlight between them. "Left or right?" she asked, her eyes flicking to Elena's. Elena's mind raced. "Left," she said, trusting her gut. "It feels higher. Might lead up." Riley nodded, no hesitation, and pulled Elena toward the left tunnel. The trust in that moment, however fleeting, hit Elena like a punch. For years they'd been adversaries, trading barbs and accusations. Now Riley was betting their lives on her instinct. The tunnel climbed steeply, the air growing thinner and colder. Elena's lungs burned, but she pushed on, driven by the sound of boots behind them. The hunters were gaining, their voices clearer now, laced with frustration. "They can't have gone far," one growled, his words bouncing off the walls. Riley's grip on Elena's hand tightened. "Faster," she whispered, her voice urgent but calm, like a captain steering through a storm. Elena marveled at her. This woman who could face death with such control. But she'd seen the crack in Riley's armor, the raw vulnerability in her confession. "'Cause I can't not." Those words haunted Elena, stirring something she buried long ago. The tunnel opened into a small alcove, barely big enough for them to stand side by side. Riley switched off her flashlight, plunging them into darkness. "Quiet," she breathed, her body pressed close to Elena's in the cramped space. The heat of her, the steady rhythm of her breath was overwhelming. Elena's heart pounded, not just from the chase but from Riley's proximity, the way her shoulder brushed against Elena's, deliberate or not. The hunter's footsteps grew louder, their flashlight beams slicing through the dark just beyond the alcove. Elena held her breath, her body trembling against Riley's. Riley's hand found hers again, squeezing gently, a silent promise. "I've got you." The beams passed, the voices fading as the hunters chose the other fork. Elena exhaled, her body sagging with relief. Riley didn't move, her hand still in Elena's, her breath warm against Elena's cheek. In the darkness, the world felt small, just the two of them, their ragged breaths mingling. "You okay?" Riley whispered, her voice softer than Elena had ever heard it. Elena nodded, though Riley couldn't see. "Yeah, you." Riley didn't answer right away. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "I thought I'd lose you back there." The words hit Elena like a wave, crashing through the walls she'd built around her heart. She turned, her face inches from Riley's in the dark. "You didn't," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm right here." For a moment neither spoke. Then Riley's hand moved, her fingers brushing Elena's jaw, tentative, like she was afraid Elena might vanish. "You're driving me crazy," Riley murmured, her voice a mix of frustration and longing. "You always have." Elena's breath caught. She wanted to laugh, to deflect, but the weight of Riley's touch, the raw honesty in her voice, stopped her. "Then why do you keep saving me?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Riley's fingers stilled, her breath hitching. "Because you're under my skin, Elena. And I hate it. I hate how much she stopped, her voice breaking. Elena's heart raced. She reached up, her hand covering Riley's, holding it against her face. "Say it," she whispered. "Please." But before Riley could, a shout echoed from the tunnel, closer than before. The hunters had doubled back. Riley cursed under her breath, pulling away. "We need to move. Now." They ran again, the tunnel twisting upward, the air growing fresher. Elena's arm was a fire of pain, but she ignored it, driven by Riley's urgency. The tunnel widened, and a faint glow appeared ahead, moonlight. They were close to an exit. Riley slowed, her flashlight scanning the opening. "Stay here," she said, moving toward the light. Elena grabbed her arm. "No way. We do this together." Riley's eyes searched hers, a storm of emotions swirling within. "You're stubborn as hell," she said, but there was no bite in her words, only a grudging admiration. They crept toward the opening, the forest stretching out below, bathed in silver moonlight. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and freedom. But the sound of voices followed, closer now, relentless. Riley scanned the terrain, her jaw tight. "There's a ridge to the west. If we can get there, we might lose them in the trees." Elena nodded, her heart pounding. "Lead the way." They slipped out of the cave, the night air biting at Elena's skin. The forest was dense, the ground uneven, but Riley moved with purpose, her hand brushing Elena's as they ran. The hunters' shouts grew fainter, but the danger wasn't gone. They reached a small clearing, the ridge just ahead. Riley stopped, her chest heaving, and turned to Elena. "If we get out of this," she said, her voice low and fierce, "we're finishing that conversation." Elena's throat tightened, a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. "Deal." But as they moved toward the ridge, a gunshot cracked through the night, and Elena felt a searing pain in her leg. She stumbled, her vision swimming, and Riley's arms caught her before she hit the ground. "Elena!" Riley's voice was raw with panic, her hands cradling Elena's face. "Stay with me. You hear me? Stay with me." Elena tried to speak, but the world was fading. Riley's face the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her. Elena's world was a haze of pain and cold, her leg a throbbing fire that pulsed with every heartbeat. Riley's arms were around her, strong and unyielding, as she dragged Elena behind a cluster of pines. The gunshot's echo still rang in Elena's ears, the forest spinning as she fought to stay conscious. "Stay with me, Elena," Riley whispered, her voice fierce but trembling. Her hands worked quickly, tearing a strip from her own shirt to tie around Elena's leg, where blood soaked through her jeans. "You're not allowed to die on me. Not now." Elena managed a weak laugh, her head lolling against Riley's shoulder. "Bossy as ever," she mumbled, her voice slurred. But Riley's touch, the desperation in her blue eyes, anchored her to the world. The hunters' voices were close, their flashlight beams cutting through the trees. Riley pressed them both low, her body shielding Elena's, her breath warm against Elena's neck. "They're not taking you," Riley said, her voice a vow. "Not while I'm here." Riley's hands moved with precision, tightening the makeshift tourniquet. Elena winced, gripping Riley's arm, her fingers digging into the leather of her jacket. The pain was a white-hot blade, but Riley's presence was a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge. "We need to move," Riley said, her voice low and urgent. "Can you walk?" Elena gritted her teeth, nodding despite the agony. "I've got this." Riley's eyes softened, a flicker of pride breaking through her worry. "That's my girl," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Elena's heart stuttered, but there was no time to dwell on it. Riley helped her up, one arm around her waist, and they staggered toward the ridge. The forest was a maze of shadows, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick canopy. Elena leaned heavily on Riley, each step a battle against the pain and the creeping fog in her mind. Riley's strength was unwavering, her focus razor-sharp, but Elena could feel the tension in her, the fear she wouldn't admit. They reached the ridge, a steep drop-off leading to a dense thicket below. Riley scanned the area, her jaw tight. "We can lose them down there," she said. "But it's gonna hurt." Elena forced a grin, her voice weak but defiant. "What's a little more pain?" Riley's lips twitched, but her eyes were haunted. "Hold on to me," she said, and they began the descent, half sliding, half falling down the rocky slope. Branches scratched at Elena's face, her legs screaming with every jolt, but Riley's grip never faltered. They hit the bottom, collapsing into the thicket. Riley pulled Elena behind a fallen log, her breath ragged. The hunters' voices were fainter now, but still too close. Elena's vision blurred, her body heavy, but she forced herself to focus on Riley's face, the fierce determination in her eyes. "You're gonna be okay," Riley said, her voice breaking. "I promise." Elena reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "You're not so bad at this hero thing," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Riley's laugh was shaky, her thumb brushing over Elena's knuckles. "Don't get used to it." They stayed hidden, the forest quiet except for the distant calls of the hunters. Elena's leg throbbed, but the bleeding had slowed, Thanks to Riley's quick work, they were safe for now, but the weight of their situation pressed down on them. Riley sat beside her, her back against the log, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. "Why keep poking the bear, knowing it could get you killed?" Elena swallowed, the question cutting deeper than she expected. "Because someone has to," she said. "The world's a mess, Riley. If I don't fight for what's right, who will?" Riley's jaw tightened, her eyes distant. "You make it sound so simple. Like it's all black and white." "It's not," Elena admitted, her voice soft. "But you pick a side. You fight for it. What's your side, Riley? Because I'm starting to think it's not what you've been pretending it is." Riley looked away, her hands clenching. "You don't know me," she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Then tell me," Elena pressed, her voice urgent despite her weakness. "Tell me why you're here, why you're risking everything for me." Riley's eyes met hers, raw and unguarded. "I was supposed to stop you," she said, her voice barely audible. "The company. They knew you were getting close. They sent me to scare you off. But I couldn't. Not then, not now." Elena's breath caught, her heart pounding. "Why not?" Riley's laugh was bitter, her eyes glistening. "Because you're you, Elena. You're fearless and infuriating and, God, you make me question everything I've ever done." The confession hung between them, heavy and electric. Elena's chest ached, not just from the pain but from the truth in Riley's words. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched Riley's cheek. "You're not the enemy," she whispered. "Not anymore." Riley leaned into her touch, her eyes closing for a moment. "You're wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm still the enemy. I can't fight you anymore." Before Elena could respond, a branch snapped nearby, and Riley's head whipped around. The hunters were back, their flashlight beams cutting through the trees. Riley cursed, pulling Elena closer. "We're not done here," she said, her voice fierce. "But we need to move. Now." They stumbled through the thicket, Riley half carrying Elena as her strength waned. The forest seemed endless, but Riley's determination was a beacon, guiding them forward. They found a shallow stream, its icy water soaking their boots as they waded through, masking their scent. Elena's vision flickered, her body heavy, but she clung to Riley, her anchor in the storm. "Don't let go," she murmured, her words slurring. "Never," Riley promised, her voice thick with emotion. They reached a small clearing, the stream widening into a pool. Riley set Elena down gently, her hands shaking as she checked the tourniquet. "We're almost there," she said, though Elena wasn't sure if she was talking about a physical place or something else entirely. The hunters' voices were distant now, but the danger wasn't gone. Elena looked at Riley, her heart swelling with something she couldn't name. "If we get out of this," she said, her voice weak but determined, "you're telling me everything." Riley's smile was small, but it was real. "Deal." As the moonlight bathed them in silver, Elena felt the world shift. They were enemies, but they were also something more, something neither could deny. And as the hunters closed in, Elena knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, she and Riley were in it together. The moonlight cast long shadows across the clearing, the air heavy with the scent of pine and the faint metallic tang of Elena's blood. She leaned against Riley, her leg numb but her heart racing, every beat a reminder of the woman holding her up. Riley's face was a mask of focus, but her eyes betrayed her fear, guilt, and something deeper, something that made Elena's chest ache with possibility. "They're still out there," Riley whispered, her voice steady despite the strain. She scanned the trees, her knife back in her hand, her body a shield between Elena and the world. "But we're close to a ranger station. If we can get there, we're safe." Elena nodded, her strength fading but her will unbroken. "Then let's move," she said, her voice a faint echo of her usual fire. Riley's arm tightened around her, and they pushed forward, the forest a blur of silver and shadow. The ranger station was a faint outline in the distance, a small cabin nestled among the trees. Hope flickered in Elena's chest, but it was tempered by the pain in her leg and the weight of Riley's confession. "I was supposed to stop you." The words echoed in her mind, a reminder of the chasm between them and the bridge they were building, fragile but real. Riley moved with purpose, her strength carrying them both. Elena's vision swam, but she focused on Riley's profile, the sharp line of her jaw, the scar above her eyebrow. She wanted to know everything, every scar, every secret, every reason Riley had chosen her over the company she'd served for years. A shout broke the silence, closer than before. Riley froze, her body tensing. "They're circling back," she muttered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "We need to hide." She pulled Elena behind a massive oak, its roots offering cover. Elena's breath was shallow, her body heavy, but she gripped Riley's hand, anchoring herself to the moment. "Riley," she whispered, her voice urgent. "If we don't make it, we will." Riley cut her off, her voice fierce. "Don't talk like that." Elena's laugh was weak, her hand tightening around Riley's. "Let me finish. If we don't, I need you to know. I don't hate you. I never really did." Riley's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Elena." The crunch of boots silenced her. Riley pressed them lower, her body covering Elena's, her knife ready. The hunters were close, their flashlight beams sweeping the ground. Elena's heart pounded, but Riley's presence was a steady flame, burning away her fear. The beams passed, the voices fading as the hunters moved in the wrong direction. Riley exhaled, her forehead resting against Elena's for a fleeting moment. "You're gonna be the death of me," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Elena smiled, her hand brushing Riley's cheek. "Worth it." They reached the ranger station just as dawn broke, the sky a soft pink that felt like a promise. The cabin was empty, but a radio crackled inside, a lifeline to the outside world. Riley helped Elena onto a bench, her hands gentle as she checked the tourniquet. "You need a doctor," Riley said, her voice tight with worry. "I'm calling for help." Elena grabbed her wrist, stopping her. "Wait. We need to talk first." Riley's eyes searched hers, wary but open. Now, Elena insisted, her voice stronger despite her pain. "You said you were supposed to stop me. Why didn't you?" Riley sank onto the bench beside her, her hands clasped tightly. "Because I saw you," she said, her voice raw. "Not the journalist, not the enemy. You. The way you fight, the way you care, the way you look at me like I'm more than what I've done. I couldn't betray that." Elena's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. "And what am I to you, Riley?" Riley's laugh was shaky, her eyes glistening. "Everything I shouldn't want. Everything I can't stop wanting." The words broke something in Elena, a dam she'd built around her heart. She leaned forward, ignoring the pain, and kissed Riley. It was soft at first, tentative, but Riley responded, her hand cupping Elena's face, the kiss deepening with years of unspoken longing. It was fire and solace, a collision of enemies turned allies, turned something more. When they pulled back, Riley's eyes were wide, her breath ragged. "You're gonna ruin me," she said, but her smile was radiant. Elena grinned, her heart full despite the pain. "Good." The radio crackled to life, a ranger's voice cutting through the moment. Help was on the way. Riley stayed by Elena's side, her hand never leaving hers, as they waited for rescue. The hunters were gone, scattered by the approaching dawn, but the real battle was the one they'd fought within themselves. Days later, Elena sat in a hospital bed, her leg bandaged, her arm healing. Riley was there as she'd been every day, her leather jacket slung over a chair, her eyes softer than Elena had ever seen them. The company was under investigation, thanks to Elena's evidence and Riley's decision to turn whistleblower. They'd won, but the cost had been high. "You didn't have to do it," Elena said, her voice quiet. "You could have walked away." Riley shook her head, her hand finding Elena's. "Not from you. Not ever." Elena squeezed her hand, a smile tugging at her lips. "You blamed me for seducing you," she teased, echoing the moment in the cave that felt like a lifetime ago. Riley laughed, her eyes bright. "And I stand by it. You're trouble, Elena. But you're my trouble." They sat in silence, the weight of their journey settling around them. They'd been enemies trapped in a cave, bloodied and broken. But they'd emerged as something new, partners, lovers, a team forged in fire. The world outside was still a mess, but together they'd face it. And that was enough. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.